And then we're able to live healthy, happy, and harmonious lives. That's a pretty nice promise, huh? It is. So according to Ayurveda, the primordial cause of disease, or disease, lack of comfort, is forgetting our own true nature. So that's really easy to say, like, oh, okay, we're forgetting our own true nature, blah, blah, blah. But if you pause and you sit for a minute, like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, what is my own true nature? What is my true essence? Well, consider if you meet somebody at a party, or you meet somebody and you're like, hi, my name's Jessica, I do this, I do that, I went to school here, I'm how many years old, I have so many children. We usually start with the most superficial of identifiers, right? That's how the external world sees us, is how we present ourselves with things that are more tangible. I drive this kind of a car, I live in this neighborhood. And that's easier to grasp. That's easier for us to be like, oh, you're this kind of a person, this is how you live your life. But Ayurveda wants us to peel back those layers. Like if we're only operating at the superficial layer, that's when we're really disconnected from this, from our soul, our Atman, our purpose. And so Ayurveda teaches us, if we choose to engage this journey towards remembering our true essence in ourselves, all the superficial stuff becomes less important. And once again, we become less attached to what that looks like. And we become more concerned with what this feels like here. That sense of balance, that sense of healthiness, happiness, and harmoniousness. So the reason we're here on the earth in this formation, this experience of you sitting on your mat, and me sitting on my mat in 2016, is so that we can start embracing the journey of remembering our own true nature. And doing that with our eyes wide open, doing it with our heart wide open. Modern society, I think, has really kind of convinced us that there is some valor in being independent. There's some valor in being, having your guard up, having these boundaries. And so we become less available to vulnerability. And so what that means with the ancient sciences of yoga and Ayurveda, we become less available to really actively participating in this experience. So that's the question, are you willing? Are you willing to open up? Are you willing to be vulnerable? You know, maybe yes, maybe no. But the fact that you're sitting here in this workshop at this beautiful conference means, yeah, you are probably. All right, so when we do that, we start to make our way back to this pure consciousness, this idea of Purusha. And we're not going into that in today's workshop, but the Sankhya philosophy, which is one of the 6 main schools of yoga, is closely related to the yoga school. And that's the philosophy that they study, with Purusha being this highest context of where we eventually end up through these evolved practices of yoga and Ayurveda. So Purusha, I like to talk about this in the beginner workshop because we all have experienced just even the smallest little bit of Purusha. And once we know what that feels like, then we know what we're working towards. We know what the state of pure consciousness feels like. So, and especially in Norway, where, you know, in the middle of the winter, you're all cozy in bed at night, you're like big down blankets. And, that feeling you have right before you go to sleep, when you're so comfortable, you're warm, you're cozy, and you're sort of drifting. And you're in between that space of consciousness, awakeness, like you are right now, and that space of being asleep, or nidra, as the yogis call it. And right before you completely lose consciousness as you go into sleep, there's just like this little sliver of absolute bliss. Have you guys experienced that before? Yeah. And it's, you don't even, since you're in between these two states, at the time, you don't really recognize what it is. But later on, you're like, oh God, that's the best feeling. Can you imagine if you were in that space all the time? No worries. That's kind of what we're trying to work through with these practices. But, so our goal is to recognize and be one with our own true nature. So that's what we're here to do. So let's talk about Ayurvedic basics. So all of the practices of Ayurveda stem from the common belief that everything in the universe is comprised of the 5 elements, some way, shape, or form. Do you agree with that statement? Are there any scientists in the room? Yeah. Do you agree with that statement? You don't know? Hey, awesome answer. Yeah. All right, well, Ayurveda does. So when we study Ayurveda, we base everything that we study off the premise that there's a combination of the 5 elements in everything, everyone, every animal on this planet. So let's talk about the 5 elements really quickly. It's like 5th grade. Who wants to name the 5 elements or one of them? Throw it out there. Air, yes. Fire, water, earth. Yes, space or ether. So in Ayurveda, we work off of, so we have the five elements. They get broken down a little bit further into what are called the 3 doshas, or the constitutions. So we're talking today specifically about the doshic composition of humans. And each of these 3 doshas is a unique composition of 2 of the elements. And this is all written down here. So we'll start with the first dosha, vata. So say that with me, vata. And vata is a combination of the air and ether elements. We liken this dosha to the animal of the hummingbird. So if you think about the hummingbird, which is constantly just going. That type of energy is how we describe vata, just fast, fast, fast. And so some of the adjectives that we use to describe vata: bubbly, excitable, impulsive. There's a lack of follow through. When out of balance, they can be anxious and nervous. And they tend to speak fast. So these are people who exhibit vata traits. People who have a lot of vata in them tend to be artists, musicians, really creative types. Writers and good storytellers. Have you guys, and please forgive me, I don't speak Norwegian yet. But some of the American, I think what the word is, idioms might, I don't know if they translate or not, but in English we have a saying, they have their head in the clouds. You guys heard that before? Yeah. Gosh, they're really spacey. Things like that. So these are describing, when we say that, we're talking about kind of these attributes that are embodying vata. And as we go through this to begin with, if it doesn't really make sense to you yet, don't worry. We're going to tie it all up and come back to it. So it will make sense, I promise. When they're out of balance, vatas are spacey, unreliable, very forgetful, moving 100 miles a minute. So vatas, as you start to study Ayurveda more and more, you'll be able to see traits, physical traits in people about how they're exhibiting one of these 3 doshas. And it's through both their physical structure, like their nose, their cheekbones, how tall they are, how big they are, but it's also in their mannerisms. So people who have a lot of vata in them, or a vata vitiation, are going to be like this. Talking with their hands, moving, fidgeting, hard to sit still, constantly playing with stuff, chewing on their gum. I know my husband calls me out on that one. So you'll start to see some of these in yourself and in people around you. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's a little bit of vata, or that's a little bit of pitta or kapha or whatever. And it becomes really relevant to your daily life. Because once you're able to identify what somebody's exhibiting, or their reaction to things, then you have more tools in your toolbox to how you choose to react to a situation, for how you choose to handle your life. So it becomes really important to kind of recognize what's happening here. The other thing that's kind of a giveaway about people who have a lot of vata tendencies is this is your friend who every time you make plans to go to coffee, or I think I see Hannah in here. No. You make plans to go to coffee or meet up or something, your friend is always 15 minutes late, and they always have a story. You're not going to believe it. I locked my keys in the house, and so then I had to climb in through the back window, and then I slipped on a plate on the floor, and I blah, blah, blah. There's a million things as to why they couldn't get there on time. That's a vata tendency. So if you have a friend, or if you are that friend, you can start to recognize that. So physically, we'll talk about vatas a little bit. They tend to be thin, with a thin bone structure. They have a tendency toward angular bodies and subtle facial features. So, angular meaning their joints are very noticeable and kind of like all elbows and knees. They have prominent joints and blood vessels, delicate digestion, so I'll talk about that later. Dry, voluminous hair, quick and lively thoughts, and they're either highly social or extremely shy. And I find this really interesting because those are kind of opposites, like polar opposites. So they're either the social butterfly who's like always going to the party, always like, what's up, man? Or they're at home by themselves, totally content to just sort of be hanging out. And the reason for this actually makes sense. So the person who's very social, who has a lot of Vata tendencies, it's that same air and ether energy, like that connection, that like, yeah, rapid fire, back and forth, sure, let's hang out, yeah, let's talk about things. And then the person who's really shy or just prefers to be alone or introspective, they're having those same energetic reactions, but it's all up here. So air and ether is directly related to our mind and our mental capacity. And so people like that tend to be up in their thoughts a lot, really in their mind. And so maybe they're sitting at home and they're playing the guitar and they're writing a book and they're painting in their house and they're doing all these creative pursuits. So they aren't as interested in human connection because they're getting something else from their creative outlet. And they tend to be really enthusiastic. So Vatas have a very quick attention span. So they'll be like 100% into an idea and then they'll move on to the next one. But they're like really into that idea in the moment.